Joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show is Tom Pelissero. Everybody, let's bring him in right away. There he is.
Hey.
Oh, he's got his breaking news outfit on.
Oh, I thought the breaking news was that he got a haircut.
No.
Did you clean up the mullet?
No.
I see.
No.
We're still working over here, but we've already had some breaking news this morning.
Yeah.
So staying alert.
Yeah.
At this time, 1 week from today, we will be about 20 minutes into the free agent negotiating window.
Nicely
it will
done.
be on in the NFL.
Yep.
So I'm really just this is like my training camp right here. We're getting used to it.
So let me ask you this question, Tom. Do you just walk around your house in regular street clothes, and then do you have a cave sort of with your butler and your high-tech equipment that you go in and you change into the outfit, and then you suddenly come out information man? Like, is there such a thing? Thank you, Mike. Well done. Is that the way it works, Tom?
So what I would say is during free agency, there are a lot of negotiations inside my own house on where I'm going to be sleeping and at what time and with how many alarms will I be waking up.
Yes.
In fact, today, again, dry run. I was on Good Morning
Dry run.
5 a.m. 5 a.m. alarm went off.
Yep.
Hit the snooze.
Yep.
5:07 alarm went off. Hit the snooze.
Yep.
Then the 5 a.m. alarm comes back at 5:09. Hit the snooze. Finally got up on the 5:15 alarm. Saw my wife after the first Good Morning Football hit. I said, good morning. She said, we're going to have to figure out how you can wake up at 5 a.m. without me waking up at 5 a.m. I've got a separate shower and bathroom situation down here in the basement.
Wow.
Will I be relegated to the guest room? Will I be relegated to a downstairs couch? Unclear. But these are all the things we're going to be trying to figure out over the next 7 days.
Tom Pelissero telling us how it all works.
Tommy P's Dry Run.
Respect, sir. Tommy P's Dry Run is a great fantasy team name.
It's already written down.
Okay. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, that's a breaking news look that he's got on right now. So you were in a hoodie, and then the Texans and the Lions made you dress in a suit and tie? Is that basically what happened?
Not today, because I was on Good Morning Football,
good
so
enough.
I was already
Regardless.
rolling. But listen, we had the first trade of the offseason, of course, broken right before I came on with you and the fellas in studio. What's up, boys?
Hey, Great to see you, buddy.
Oh, my
Titans and Jets
We're back.
making their deal last week, and then two trades early this morning. Kind of fascinating. You have a Texans offense that's been trying to figure out how to put together their offensive line, and it appears that part of the plan for fixing it is pulling it apart. They trade Titus Howard to the Browns for a 5th-round draft pick, clear some guaranteed money off their books, and then they include Juice Scruggs, who played a lot of snaps for him last year as well, as part of the deal with the Lions for David Montgomery. Nick Caserio's had luck in the past with trading for veteran running backs. Of course, Joe Mixon came over in a trade from Cincinnati a couple of years ago, responded with a 1,000-yard season. Last year, he signs Nick Chubb, now trying to get similar production out of David Montgomery, a guy who they love in Detroit. He continued to bring value to them. It was not going to make much sense for him to go in and be in a timeshare someplace else. He was going to do that. He could have done it in Detroit. But in Houston, he's got the opportunity to be the lead back on a team that's been at the playoffs 3 years in a row. I'd expect that they address his contract as well. So good situation for David Montgomery. The rare trade, Rich, where from a fantasy perspective, you would look at both guys involved, Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, and say stock goes up.
Yeah, and by the way, Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. Our radio audience was rejoining us in the middle of your reporting there on the trade, David Montgomery to the Texans, and it's more than a 5th, right? You reported it's a 4th and a 7th, and an actual offensive line player, and an actual offensive line player got traded to the Browns from the Texans earlier in the day. Juice Scruggs to Detroit and Titus Howard to the Browns. Why are the Texans trading away offensive linemen in a league where offensive linemen should stay? Why are they doing that?
You would anticipate this is a broader part of Nick Caserio's plan here. With Titus Howard, he gets a new deal, 3 years and $63 million in Cleveland, but he had money that was on the book. So Houston clears some of that off. Juice Scruggs was not making a lot. I mean, he was a second-round pick now going into year 3, but they're giving themselves some flexibility. Giving up those picks in addition to Scruggs to the Lions would indicate that there was competition to go get David Montgomery. But for the Texans, listen, there's not a lot of centers out there, but if you're looking for guards, if you were looking for, let's say, kind of the second, third tier of tackle, there are some options out there in free agency. Also, you can never overlook these deals are getting done a day after everybody watched the offensive linemen work out at the combine. I talked to a head coach about something completely unrelated earlier today. He was talking about a different position group and saying, we're sitting here going, who should we sign in free agency? Then after watching these guys work out, it's like, let's not even spend our money there. Let's spend our money someplace else. It's all part of this process. I mean, it's come up in the past. The possibility of moving free agency after the draft. The league has brought that up. The unions never wanted to do that because it's a way that they would look at it as depressing the market. But the fact that free agency comes first, you're still going to have teams that if they're not confident they can fill some of these holes, they're going to go out, whether it's free agency or a trade, fill those holes in advance of the draft. I would just say this, Nick Caserio is not doing anything totally in isolation here. There's something bigger at play, and we'll find out what that is over the next 7 to 10 days.
What about the Lions end of it, Tom? Why trade David Montgomery? Sonic and Knuckles has been one of the better combinations, certainly in terms of scoring touchdowns, one of the most dynamic, productive combinations we've seen ever. And that's not hyperbole, Tom. Why are they breaking up Sonic and Knuckles?
He was due $6 million cash this year. $4 million would have become guaranteed next week. David Montgomery's role in Detroit had diminished over the last couple of years. And Brad Holmes, referenced this earlier in the offseason that, for David Montgomery, they love the guy, but if he wants the opportunity to go out and be a feature back, maybe get one more payday, he's 28 years old, that was probably going to have to take place someplace else. Jahmyr Gibbs is now extension eligible. We'll see based upon, potentially a Breece Hall deal, if that gets done, based upon maybe a Bijan Robinson deal, exactly where the market could end up going for Jahmyr Gibbs. But it's going to be big money. It's going to be, probably up in the high teens. And so realistically, you're probably better off if you're the Lions, either getting an economical option in free agency or drafting a running back or two to try to fill that other role. So it was probably best for everybody. The Lions free up some cash and cap space. The Texans upgrade, and David Montgomery gets an opportunity now to be a feature back, which was simply never going to happen in Detroit.
All right, Tom Pelissero here with some breaking news on this Monday after the Combine. What's the story come out of a Combine? I mean, is it still Maxx Crosby, even though we didn't really get much smoke or fire on that front over the weekend, Tom?
I would say Maxx Crosby and his future is as big of a story as you have in the NFL right now. We talked about this last week. We've heard what John Spytek said publicly at the podium, that he expects Crosby to be there, that they've got a great relationship. They talk and text all the time. We have not heard directly from Max about how he felt about those comments, how he feels at this point about his future. I have gotten roughly 50 Instagram story alerts from Max, who appears to be in the facility shooting all 22 tape of himself making plays, showing himself boxing, shooting hoops, proving in a variety of different ways, A, I'm still a great player, B, I'm a lot closer to health than other people might think that I am. And the Raiders, even though they're not proactively making calls, I would believe that they are going to continue to get calls. And anybody who needs a pass rusher is going to be interested in this because, there's Trey Hendrickson, Odafe Owe. You got a few guys in free agency, but really a trade for Max, if you're not going to draft one, is probably your best way to get an elite type of pass rusher. Those guys just don't hit the market. So if I'm thinking, who would be the teams that would make sense for Maxx Crosby? Again, I think anybody who's a contender and has sufficient cap space or the ability to create it should be involved. But, a few that would come to mind would be the Chicago Bears, a team that people will remember swung another trade with the Raiders for a pretty high-profile pass rusher in Khalil Mack some years ago. They feel like they're close. They were right there at the end in the playoffs. Could Maxx Crosby be somebody that puts them over the top and elevates that pass rush? I think that would be a fit. I could see Buffalo, they've got some things they've got to work out in terms of their salary cap and how they're going to devote their resources in this offseason with Joe Brady coming aboard as a first-time head coach, and also changing over the defense now with Jim Leonard calling the plays there. But, for Max to come in and join that team that's been looking for a closer, they've taken swings at it, in signing Von Miller years ago, I could see that being a fit. And then the one that everybody wants to keep talking about, and I do believe that it makes sense, is with the Cowboys. Max is from that area. He trains in the offseason with CeeDee Lamb. The Cowboys have ammunition. They don't have any day 2 picks this year, but they got 2 first-rounders. They've got enough cash and cap flexibility. Jerry Jones has indicated they're going to be aggressive, and I believe a lot of that aggressiveness is going to be focused on the defensive side of the ball. What is that price tag going to be? Is it a first-round pick and more? Are the Raiders going to draw a hard line at getting 2 first-round picks? All those remain open-ended questions. But if we're just looking at this from a leverage perspective, when do you maximize your leverage? I would say it's sometime before the market opens 1 week from today. Because the moment some of these teams that need pass rush help go and spend that money someplace else, you start to run out of suitors, kind of like the Bengals did last year with Trey Hendrickson. Maxx Crosby is different than everybody else who's available. He's 29 years old, coming off of a knee surgery, but still very much in his prime. A culture changer behind the scenes. Obviously one of the best defensive edge players that we have in the entire NFL. He's different, but you still need the money to pay him, and you need the picks, the ammunition, maybe a player to go and acquire him. The moment you start making other moves, it becomes harder. So if the Raiders are going to trade Maxx Crosby, there's no hard deadline on it. He doesn't have like a conversion or anything like that makes it from a contract perspective necessary. But I have to believe the Raiders are approaching this, that if they're going to trade him, doing so before next week would make sense.
Well, even before the draft, obviously. I mean, that would have to be the deadline. And
right.
And the Cowboys fascinate me in that regard, because if they end up trading Micah and using the draft choices they get to go get Maxx Crosby, I understand Crosby's 4 years older, but he's also a different guy in the locker room. It would be a different setup. And certainly if I'm the Raiders, I'm intrigued by that 12th overall pick based on all those defensive linemen I just saw work out at the combine. If you can get Mendoza and one of them, you might be tempted on that front, even though Maxx Crosby means so much. It's interesting that the thing is fascinating to me. But the Cowboys, aren't they in the worst cap hell of any team in the NFL right now? Obviously, things can be massaged, but right now they're almost $60 million over the cap. Tom,
there's different contracts that they can dip into and create cap space pretty easily, doing simple conversions on Dak Prescott, among others. They'll get him back closer. There's also the possibility you could trade a player in a deal to go get a Maxx Crosby, which would help alleviate some of that. And then when you go back to the Micah Parsons trade, there's a lot of different ways that you could look at it. And that's one of those where it's defining trades that we'll all be talking about for years to come and analyzing it and hyper analyzing it. But if you look at it from this perspective, if in the end, based on where all these picks ended up going and what they did with them, if they traded Micah Parsons, in essence, for Kenny Clark, Quinnen Williams, and let's say Maxx Crosby, that's a pretty good haul that allows you to accelerate your rebuild, as opposed to just taking those picks, drafting players, and hope they develop into those types of core talents.
Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. When does the quarterback market pop? When?
This is one of the ongoing mysteries, in part because those guys who have the guarantee triggers in their contracts, those all come after the start of the league year. Here's what I mean in very simple terms. We'll know by tomorrow what happens with Daniel Jones and the Colts. They've been trying to get a long-term deal done. If they can't, I would anticipate that they tag Jones. It may be the transition tag, which is at a lower number, but we'll see what direction that goes. Everybody else, in terms of namely Malik Willis and what his market is going to be, those players will become free agents on Monday. And so some of the same teams that might be going, all right, what is the right number to go get a Malik Willis? Or if you're going to, in a different bucket, sign a Joe Flacco or a Jimmy Garoppolo, or whether it's Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, there's some big names that are available. You may have to make those decisions before you have final knowledge on whether any of these other guys are going to end up getting cut. The prevailing sense within the league is, besides Kirk Cousins, who we know based on his contract is going to be released on March 11th, you have triggers in the contracts of Geno Smith and Tua Tagovailoa that don't hit until next Friday the 13th, and a Kyler trigger that doesn't hit until Sunday the 15th. So if you're coming down to it, you might think, all right, we're just going to sign this guy when he gets cut for the minimum. But if one of those teams decide to hold the player you're going after, you might be more motivated just to go out and at least get an insurance plan before those insurance plans dry up. That's one of the reasons this quarterback market is so difficult to project right now. I wouldn't think that all those teams, the Raiders, the Cardinals, the Dolphins, drag this all the way out into the end of next week. Based on the fact those guys have guaranteed money, the players technically can't be released until next Wednesday, March 11th, but you could tell them, you could announce it, you could do a lot of different things that would allow the market to start moving. But right now, I've talked to many of those teams that are eyeing those players, and to a certain degree, while they're working behind the scenes, they are frozen a little bit by not having firm and final word from those teams of exactly how this is going to play out. All signs are pointing to Tua becoming available. If they can't trade him, which has always seemed like a complicated situation, he would be released, I presume, prior to March 13th. So that would be next Thursday. And then with Kyler Murray, it seems like things are pointing that direction, but Kyler has not been told what the firm and final word is. I believe he would have a really robust market if he were cut and be able to sign for the minimum. And Geno Smith would have a market. But, you know, if you're the Raiders, we've kind of talked about the Raiders within this lens of, well, they're drafting Fernando Mendoza, we think, at number 1 overall. So they've got their quarterback. What if Clint Kubiak doesn't want to play him out of the gate? What if the best thing for an RPO-heavy quarterback in his college career is to sit back behind a veteran and learn until they feel like he's really ready to hit the ground running on a Raiders team that's doing a ground-up rebuild? If that is the scenario you have in your head, do you just keep Geno Smith, who you're already paying $18.5 this year? He'd have another $8 million vest if he's still on the roster on March 13th. Do you move on from Geno, whether it's via trade or cut, and maybe sign one of these other guys that you potentially can get for the minimum or close to it? Of all the teams that we've talked about, and there are a bunch that need quarterbacks from the Vikings, the Steelers, the Dolphins, and the Cardinals, presuming that they move on, the Colts, pending what happens with Daniel Jones, among others. The Raiders are another team that, depending what they do with Geno Smith, don't rule out them being players in that same market, probably not spending much money to do it, but looking to add potentially another veteran to that room as well.
Man, and this is all going to pop in the next week, right? I mean, pretty much at this point by Monday, we should get a better indication of where these things are going, because every single team that you're referring to that's going to cut their quarterback or potentially deal him has another team that's wondering if they're available to be had because they've been cut or not. Like this, there's going to be too many people needing answers to let this thing linger. And then there's, Rodgers, who says he's going to let the Steelers know sooner rather than later, or at least that's the assumption. We haven't heard a single thing from him.
That's another one. If the Steelers, we've talked a lot about Aaron Rodgers, and he's been in communication with Mike McCarthy. He spoke recently with Omar Khan, but we're a week away from the free agent negotiating window opens, which was the soft target for having a Rodgers decision. To this point, as I sit here, we don't have an Aaron Rodgers decision. So even the Steelers, they like Will Howard, but you're not just going to go, well, Will Howard, that's the room for the year, him and Mason Rudolph. You're acquiring somebody somehow. Do they become players for, let's say, a Kirk Cousins, who I know that if things had fallen differently last year, could have been a consideration in Pittsburgh? These are all intertwined here, Rich. And I'm not even being, cryptic as I often am. I'm just literally saying the teams themselves don't firmly know so many different things. And so much of this quarterback market is going to be defined by who becomes available, that there is a lot of uncertainty. One of the things that we'll get a pretty clear idea of by this time 1 week from now is, what is the Malik Willis market, and does he take out one of those starting jobs? If the money goes crazy, it's going to eliminate some people from being in that mix. I mean, Malik is, I've always liked Malik, going back to meeting him at the Senior Bowl. He made the most of his opportunities. We know his downfield passing numbers are off the charts, but it is a really, really small sample size. Does somebody feel confident in Malik Willis enough to say we're going to give you 20, 25 million a year? Is it possible the number comes in under that? If the number's under 20 million, and I'm not saying that it will be, but if it were, that might bring some other teams into play. Even a team like the Vikings that we've talked about repeatedly as being in the market for the bare minimum quarterback. If you got another bite at the apple here on a young quarterback to come in and potentially compete with J.J. McCarthy, there's just a plethora of different ways that this entire thing can go. I would say the first step of this, which we'll get word on in the next 28 hours here, is what's happening in Indianapolis with Daniel Jones. Is it possible they get a deal done? I don't, sitting right here, right now, believe that's going to happen. Then do they franchise tag him or do they transition tag him? If you transition tag him, that means now he can sign an offer sheet someplace else. The Colts may well match it, but it would at least leave that door cracked open ajar for other teams to go, even for a guy coming off an Achilles. He played at a really high level when they started 7-1 last year. It'd be one more thing for these teams to evaluate.
Yeah, we had Chris Ballard on during the combine. I did not get the sense that somebody other than Daniel Jones is their quarterback in the fall. Like I don't think he's going anywhere. They're going to figure that thing out one way or another. Franchise tag to maybe kick the can down the road and figure it out. Before I let you go, what are the other tag situations? This is a 4 p.m. Eastern Tuesday deadline on that, Tom. What do you got for me here?
Well, let's start with the Jets and Breece Hall. And their GM, Darren Muji, said at the Combine that if they can't get a deal done with Breece, then they are planning to tag him. They are still working on that. The door is not completely slammed shut on getting a Breece Hall deal done. But he's the top running back on the market. And so we'll see exactly how this plays out. If they can't get a deal done, I know there's been a lot of talk about the transition tag. I wouldn't be surprised if it's the franchise tag instead. You're talking about only a $3 million difference from 11 to 14. It would, prevent one of those situations like I'm talking about with Daniel Jones, where if you transition him, somebody else can sign him to an offer sheet that makes it more complicated for you to match and re-sign the player. We'll see what direction that goes, but would not be a surprise to me if Breece Hall ends up getting the franchise tag by 4 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday. Trey Hendrickson in Cincinnati is another really fascinating one because he would be the top defensive end if he hits the market. It has always seemed logical that he is going to hit the market, but the Bengals have refused to rule out the possibility of using the franchise tag on him, possibly setting up a tag and trade situation, because the moment that Trey would get tagged, I would imagine, based upon what's happened the last 2 years, that he's going to go through the roof. He doesn't want to be staying in Cincinnati. He doesn't want to have his movement restricted. Again, we'll find out. There's been nothing clearly communicated on that front to this point. Certainly, Trey Hendrickson would be one of the top free agents. And that might be it, Rich. I'm not anticipating this being a big tag year. George Pickens, Kyle Pitts have already gotten the franchise tag. The Colts are going to use it, whether it's on Daniel Jones or potentially on Alec Pierce. The Jets, again, barring a deal, to intend to use one on Breece, and maybe the Bengals. That's 4 or 5 tags in a league where, it's not uncommon for us to have 8 to 10 of those. I think that speaks in part to the realities of the tags that at some positions are just completely prohibitive. I mean, there's some good linebackers that are going to hit free agency this year, whether that's, Quay Walker, Devin Lloyd, but a $27 million tag number is just not realistic. Yeah. Nobody's going to do that. And there's also some other players that are going to hit free agency that I believe are going to have, really strong markets. It's a pretty short list, but, take a John Franklin Myers, not a household name, never been to the Pro Bowl, but position scarcity drives a lot of this. There are virtually no true defensive linemen, interior players, defensive tackles that are going to hit free agency. I've seen people projecting John Franklin Myers getting, 10 to 12 million. I'll say this one, Rich. Don't be surprised if that number has a 2 in front of it when JFM hits free agency.
Okay. And Kenneth Walker, the Super Bowl MVP walks? Is that what happens?
I would be surprised. It'd be really hard to franchise tag Kenneth Walker. And I don't really see the transition tag being an option. Doesn't mean they can't get a deal done. But it would be really tough financially and otherwise. All those guys that Seattle has coming up, between Devin Witherspoon, Jackson Smith and Jigba, among others, that are up for contract extensions. If the market's right, John Schneider is always he's never going to slam the door on any player, but a $14+ million franchise tag. I know how important Kenneth Walker was in the playoff run, and of course winning Super Bowl MVP. But tagging him just doesn't seem realistic for where they are right now. And so I do believe that Kenneth Walker is going to get an opportunity to see his market.
Tom, thanks again. I will reach out to you maybe later in the week, get you back on here, and it'll be interesting to see if you're suited and booted or you're just casual. We'll find out.
We are suited, booted, and ready for at least the next 2 weeks, Rich.
Tom,
anytime, night or day, I will sleep in the suit.
Tom Pelissero, everybody. Check him out on the Insiders on NFL Network and NFL Plus, right here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, lots to take in. Also, your phone calls, 844-204-RICH, number to dial. Maxx Crosby with a star on the side of his helmet.